Ruby Powers is a Houston area immigration attorney here to walk through what the Supreme Court heard and why it could have significant impacts on Houstonians. Ruby, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
First of all, just what is the Temporary Protected Status Program?
So this is a really generous program that the U.S. created around 1990, and that it's had millions of people over time. And right now we have 1.3 million from about 17 countries. It's usually when something has gone wrong, like civil unrest, earthquake, mudslides,
some kind of natural disaster
in those countries, and we temporarily allow them to stay here. They get work authorizations, usually in periods of 18 months, and they have to renew it. They're allowed to apply for a travel permission. I think it allows a lot of people work authorization. It's not a permanent path to a legal green card, a legal permanent residency, or citizenship. But a lot of them, and for the most part, it doesn't get discontinued until more recently. And that's really what a lot of this is about, and what the basis of why it's being discontinued for various countries and what reasons. But for the most part, it's a temporary status for humanitarian purposes.
Yeah. So again, natural disasters, but also war zones or circumstances where somebody's life is very much threatened for a period of time. I guess a big piece in all of this is defining temporary, and also some of the language in the program says under extraordinary circumstances or temporary needs. So it's not all just on a temporary basis.
Right. And what we've also seen is that, when they say temporary, we've seen some of them extend for 20, 30 years.
Right.
And they now have U.S. citizen children who can petition for them and things like that. But also I find that I think they'll create it when people don't necessarily qualify for asylum, but it is a good way to be able to stay here, because usually it'll happen after there's a lot of people from that country here. And they're like, wait, we should probably give them TPS, because they don't give them a lot of advance notice. Usually when they announce it, it's like 24 hours before they make it valid, and you have to have been in the country on the next day.
So why are these two cases involving Syrians and Haitians specifically before the High Court?
So Haiti was given TPS back in 2010 and Syria in 2012. And we're impacting about 350,000 for the Haitians that have TPS, 6,000 Syrians. So the DHS under Christine Nome, they basically discontinued the TPSs, saying conditions are better. And, very briefly, and the Department of State said, sure, yeah. And even though on other places of their website it says Americans do not go to these countries. Anyway, the argument, the lower courts were moved it all the way up to the Supreme Court because they said it was based off of motivated by racial animus, and it was against the equal protection guarantees of the law. And so that's really what's going on here is, can the Department of Homeland Security, what was the motive for them to get rid of TPS for these two countries? And the other argument here is from the Trump administration is, can this even be reviewed by the court at all? And so it's really not just about TPS, but but this is really fascinating, because whatever happens, and we're waiting for probably a decision in late June of this year, this is going to impact very likely all the other TPS cases that exist in the country, because it's going to either empower DHS to be able to terminate, depending on what their argument is to terminate, or they might have to, it's sort of similar to what happened with DACA when it went up to the Supreme Court, the justification of why the Trump administration was trying to discontinue it.
So it sounds like there are two kind of major tracks here. There's the question of this particular program and how much authority any administration has and how it's conducted. And then the question of, can courts even tell any administration how to administer? That seems like a much, much bigger question.
It really is. It is. But the argument is that the equal protections guarantees, and that is the reason why this needs to be reviewed. Because I mean, it doesn't make sense every time. I mean, my opinion, that every time this administration is discontinuing a TPS, you just Google that country and like, there's still a whole bunch of stuff going on over there. And you look at our Department of State and it says, don't go to this country right now. Red alert, level 5, whatever I forgot what they do. And like U.S. citizens advise not to, and you're like, well, then why are we discontinuing TPS? Because they'll say, DHS says, oh, the country conditions have improved. We're like, in what, are we reading the same news?
That said, if the argument is that runs afoul of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, well, that applies to U.S. citizens. These are not U.S. citizens.
That's true. They're not U.S. citizens, but they're also talking about the racial animus of like why they're targeting certain TPS applicants versus other ones that they haven't. But it's also, why? What's the motivation to discontinue some of these programs?
Can we glean from the questions and comments that Supreme Court justices offered up Wednesday during oral arguments how the High Court is likely to rule in this case?
I think we can. I think it's favorable to the TPS recipients, but time will tell. There's a lot on the line with this. Do they even have the power to review this type of situation? Is really sort of on the line, but the impact is 1.3 million TPS recipients, because even though we're just talking about potentially 356,000 for Syria and Haiti, this is really a large sweeping argument. And there's a lot of other temporary parole type of programs, so this also could open up for other issues as well.
All right. So for those that are applicants to this program who have been approved, is this really something that could affect all of them, or is it likely that the High Court will rule about these specific instances that are before them?
Well, I think what's going to happen is that we'll get a decision in late June, because that's usually when the Supreme Court makes their decisions, about Haitians and the Syrians. So that's specifically the 356,000 of those recipients, of those applicants. But depending on the decision, it's going to have a snowball effect.
If they do a more broad decision.
Right.
And that could then include notably a large population of Venezuelans here in Houston. That's
right. We have a lot of TPS recipient applicants here in the in Texas and in Houston. And I mean, it's really going to have a huge impact on employers, employment, our economy. There's probably a lot of employers and businesses listening, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I have a lot of TPS, recipients on my payroll, and if their work authorization is discontinued, that's going to be a problem."
What should TPS holders here in Greater Houston do right now as we await this High Court decision?
Well, I would have a consultation, have a plan, have a backup plan, because, we could find out that this gets discontinued, and what's the plan? So I think don't assume things either way at this moment. It could be unfortunately, it's very fluid right now. So have a consultation, have a backup plan, know what your rights are.
And what happens to these TPS holders from Haiti and Syria specifically in the meantime?
Well, they're still allowed to have it at this moment while we're waiting for this decision. And usually there's a sort of like a transition period where people are given, if it were to be discontinued, like sort of like a little grace period of 30, 60 days or something like that. So, but I mean, I would, think it's immigration's really fluid right now. So,
it is fluid and complicated and intense, I imagine.
Right.
Yeah. Ruby Powers is a Houston-based immigration attorney and the founder of Powers Law Group. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.